Alrighty, so I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen with you guys real fast. Make sure that works. Okay, so let's get this started. All right, can everyone see the presentation okay? Hopefully, yeah, okay. So my name is Lauren Moore. I am with Queen City Counseling. I am a therapist here, and we work with ages from 13 to 25. So we're really working with adolescents most of the time and young adults. So I'm really excited to get to share some info on love languages tonight and some communication tips. I'm going to see if I can try to, there you go. So you guys don't have to see everyone else there. Does that work? Oh, maybe. Okay. Let's see. So our outline is going to be talking about love languages, how to utilize them as a parent, also as a teacher, if we've got any teachers on tonight. We're going to go through the importance of balancing your love languages out. And I am going to provide you guys a link that you can go on and figure out your own love language if that's something you're interested in. We're also going to go over communication tips. So I statements, I call them I feel statements because that is easier to remember in my mind, and a little bit of emotional coaching, which is really talking about listening with empathy and communicating well. I also have some additional resources I want to share with you guys, some books and TED Talks I like to listen to. And then at the end, we'll have time for questions if anyone has any, and I'll share some info about our practice a little bit more. Okay, so to start off with love languages, it's really important to think about it as fulfilling an adolescent's need for emotional love. So the 5 love languages is a concept developed by Gary Chapman. He's actually located in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and his books are very, very successful. He's highly regarded in the therapeutic community. He's written several books, not just love languages for adolescents. It's all over the place. It's for couples and children as well. So if you're ever interested in looking into that kind of information, feel free to go onto his website. I'm going to have a link for that later as well. So you can see the book cover on here on the right. This book in particular is talking about teenagers and adolescents, how to tailor your love languages to the adolescent. Another important part of love languages is thinking about how they may change over time. So your child at age 5 may have loved to give you art as a gift, right? That might be their love language, but over time that may have changed. So that's something to think about as a parent and a teacher. If you're not really sure what your adolescent really speaks as far as the love language, it's important to really ask questions, observe them, and experiment. So you might ask them questions like, hey, what do you think would make our relationship better? Or how do you think we can communicate better? It's probably not going to be a conversation you just randomly walk up to them and start, but maybe slowly start going off and saying, you know, I'm trying to communicate better with you. Do you think you're open to talking about that? Or I'm working on parenting, or I'm working on being a better teacher, and I'm interested to hear what you have to say about what you think we should communicate better. When we're looking at love languages, we want to utilize all 5 of them as much as we can. There are usually a primary and secondary love language, but it's also important to use all of them. So we want to make sure that we're coming at the child holistically and really communicating in as many ways as we can, and also modeling it as in many ways as we can to them. Over the course of what you hear from this presentation, I do want you to keep in mind that our ultimate goal here is fostering their sense of independence. So an adolescent at this stage, they are trying to become their own person. They're trying to figure out their identity. They want that independence. They are going to push away a lot of the times. Not every time, but you will probably experience that sometimes. And that's them trying to be their own person. That's natural and that's normal. They also have more abstract thinking. So your child that maybe didn't really understand some concepts are now really coming to terms with things like social justice, for example. That might not have been something they were interested in, but maybe it is now. So I want y'all to just keep that in mind when thinking about these things, that we don't want to slow them down on fostering their sense of independence. We want to foster that. And I forgot to mention, if anyone has any questions throughout, you can always just chat them to me and I'll get them at the end. So words of affirmation is that first love language I want to go over. So this is a really common one. I'm sure you guys have heard of it. It's thinking about words of praise and words of affection, and sometimes doing that around other people too. So words of praise specifically is about behaviors. So you might point out something that they've done well that you've noticed. So for example, your child may have done their homework and you're really proud of them for completing it. So you could say, hey, you did a great job getting that homework done, maybe even a whole day early, right? That would be something to praise right now, especially with everything they're dealing with. When you're using words of praise, one thing we want to point out is we don't want to use the word but, right? We don't want to say, hey, you did a great job cleaning the bathroom, but you didn't do this, right? You didn't clean the tub right or something. I'm not saying you can't do that, but I am saying when you're trying to fulfill like an emotional love and need, and you're trying to really show that you care, try to leave the but statement out of it for just a little bit. Words of affection are also important in words of affirmation. These are things that you're pointing out in your child as positive qualities. You don't want to say something that, is not going to make sense, or they're going to be like, no, I'm not. Try to think of something that you can maybe even give an example of. So you're working so hard, right? You are up all night trying to study. I hope they're not up all night, but if that was the case, maybe you could point that out. Even just saying I love you, or I love when you're home and hanging out with us, all of those things can go a really long way when that adolescent is speaking with words of affirmation as their love language. Words in the presence of others can be important in this time. So if their friends are around or family members are around, maybe saying something in front of them to show that like you really mean it and that you're proud of them. It does work. There are some kids who don't like to do that. They're maybe a little bit more shy or just not comfortable with that. So think about your child in particular and maybe what audience you want to have for that, if any. In the case of teaching, maybe you have a board that's like displaying positive things about your students, like, you're proud of them for something, or maybe you call out like some people who made some great grades or other things that you've noticed. They may not like that in front of the whole classroom, or they might like it in just front of their friends. So it just depends. But that's something to think about. Signs that this is the adolescent's love language would be a reaction or an impact on them from words. So if you notice that you say something positive to them and they get like a smile on their face and they seem more cheerful or more connected to you, it's probably a good sign that they like words of affirmation. Or it could be the opposite. So you might say something along the lines of like, I was really disappointed in that, or whatever happened. And that might really hurt them, right? So that would be another sign that words are really impacting them. Okay, the next one is physical touch. So physical touch is a love language. One thing to keep in mind, of course, is that it's appropriate and an appropriate time, place, and manner for the adolescent. It is different now than when they were children for a lot of adolescents. So we don't want to make them feel embarrassed or anything like that. Maybe it's just a hug when their friends aren't around, or maybe they don't care. It just totally depends on the kid. So when we are using physical touch, we want to really be mindful of body language here. If your adolescent is across the room talking to you, not really getting closer, or, almost feels like they're avoiding you, it's probably not the best time to go up and approach them. It doesn't have to be a hug when I say physical touch either. It might be a high five or a fist bump or a pat on the back, whatever is normal for your family or your interaction. with an adolescent, that is going to be probably the most appropriate for them. Think about your own body language. So we want to have an open body language with our shoulders back, maybe our chin is up higher, probably not arms crossed. When your arms are crossed, it comes off a little bit more closed. And that's also something to keep in mind when you're looking at the adolescent. So if they're a little bit more closed off, they probably don't want to be approached. That's our natural way of saying, like, do not approach me. It's really important to respect the adolescent's mood and boundaries in this situation. So if they're in a really cranky mood and they're really not up for talking, I wouldn't push it with physical touch. Signs that this is your adolescent's love language, they're typically going to go to you for physical touch, like a hug or something like that. Maybe you win a board game and they want to high five you. These little cues are really important to observe. And that's what I was getting at in the slide a few slides back about observing their behavior. So really like watching how they interact with you, but other people as well, to figure out what is that love language. Okay, the next one is quality time. This is a big one. This is one that a lot of parents, I feel like, try to have with their children. The biggest part of quality time is making sure you're emotionally present. So we don't want to be scrolling on Facebook or taking a call from a relative if it's time that you really dedicated as quality time with your child. It would be great to focus more on the conversation than what you're actually doing. So I wouldn't stress too much about picking the right activity. It's always great to think about their interests, but it doesn't have to be something that they're obsessed with doing, right? You could suggest something new, anything that is really spending time with each other and allowing conversation. If your child does like quality time as a love language, they may come up with ideas themselves. They might ask to go on a walk or a bike ride or go shopping together in normal times. So whatever is going to be the most appropriate for your child and what they like to do is good, but you don't have to do something like super exciting for quality time. Body language is important as well here. So we want to have eye contact and maybe slightly lean forward. That really shows that you're interested in what they're saying. Keeping your arms uncrossed and your body open as much as possible. When you're in quality time, you're trying to spend quality time, it'd be great to try to schedule this ahead with your adolescent. So asking them, when can you hang out for a little bit, or would they like to do this, rather than forcing them. We want to come from a sense of they're independent and that they can make that kind of decision of how to spend their time. And we also want to come from it as we respect their own boundaries and we just want them to want it, right? We don't want to force them. We're trying to fulfill an emotional need here. I get into a little bit about active listening on here, and we'll talk a little bit more on a later slide, but a big portion of active listening is thinking about feelings. So if you're sitting there having a conversation with your adolescent, maybe they are talking about something that really upset them, or maybe something that made them happy. You as a parent, caregiver, teacher, you probably have a radar going off from watching them talk and listening to them about what emotion may be coming up. It is totally fine to take a guess at it. Okay, you could say, are you feeling XYZ? Are you feeling happy right now? Are you feeling sad, upset, hurt? You may not get it right, but they'll let you know. They'll let you know if there's a different emotion at play, and then they can talk about it with you. I really like also reflecting back what you hear. So if they talk and say something that's, say a story, for example, they're trying to tell you a story about something that happened. You can kind of give a little summary of what happened that you heard in a few words or less, and also pair that emotion with it. So, okay, so this happened and you're feeling upset about that. Again, asking questions to clarify is super important. It helps the conversation keep going, asking more questions, and it lets the adolescent get a chance to explain themselves better. They may not get it right the first time or feel like they didn't do a good job explaining, but your questions give them more chances to connect with you. signs that this is the adolescent's love language would be that they are asking to spend time with you. So just keep your radar out for that. See if you notice them asking. You could also experiment with them on that. So see if they'd want to spend quality time with you by asking them. You would also experiment with other love languages as well and try to figure out what they positively respond to when it comes to like emotional attention. Okay, acts of service is the fourth one. It is a way of doing things for someone else, and you're not receiving payment or something like that. It's really coming from the goodness of your heart. Maybe you're wanting to be helpful, that kind of thing. So when you think about acts of service as a parent or a teacher, it can probably get a little confusing thinking like, oh, I don't want to do everything for them. I want them to be independent. And that's very reasonable. And we definitely want to still foster independence here. But think of this as like more sporadic, right? It's not all day, every day that you're doing everything for your child. Maybe they're really stressed out one day and you decide to do a chore for them that they would normally be expected to do. Think about the act of service as a way to show your adolescent that you love and care about them. This is a great way when you perform acts of service for your adolescent. It's a great way to model and guide them. It's a great way to teach. So you could offer to teach them how to cook instead of just always making them a meal. Even if you do regularly make meals, that's no problem. But just think about maybe every once in a while adding in, hey, do you want to learn how to cook this tonight? And of course, I have to add in parentheses that does require a lot of patience. So I'd be prepared for that. Balance is great, and it's a great concept to think about with all of these, but especially acts of service, so that we're not creating a dependency on you. It might be good to plan in advance with your adolescent, if possible, to do acts of service. So if you wanted to help them out with like homework, and that's something that they're willing to receive, they want your help, then we would try to plan that in advance and not just do it on the spur of the moment. Could also take steps to develop their interests. So if they're really interested in guitar, maybe you say, would you want to try to learn guitar together, right? You helping them learn something is an act of service. Okay, so examples, I kind of mentioned a few, but helping create flashcards with them might be a great act of service. Maybe they're really swamped and they don't have time to do flashcards. Maybe they do Quizlet, like the online version, right? You can still help them with that if they're willing to accept it. Maybe creating flashcards for them is a natural learning mechanism, so they wouldn't want you to do that. That's why we would need to ask ahead. Surprise breakfast. I don't know if anyone here has woken up to surprise pancakes, but that's usually a nice feeling, right? Having a big breakfast that you can wake up to, or maybe cook their favorite meal for no reason except that you love them. Helping them with a chore, like I mentioned, all kinds of things are a great way for acts of service. This could also be used in volunteering. If you wanted to help your child learn how to volunteer, you could do it with them. This is usually expressed by adolescents away from their parents, but usually in my office I'll hear kids say, my parents do everything for me. That's how I know they love me, right? So they're probably going to express it. I can't guarantee that it'll be to you, but maybe if you notice that they're really appreciative of the things you do for them, and when it comes to acts of service, this may be their love language. Last but not least is gifts. So gifts are awesome, but there are some kind of rules to follow when we're thinking about gifts in terms of love languages. So the first would be avoiding bartering. I can't tell you guys how many times I have bartered with my own parents growing up about getting my gas tank filled, for example. So we don't want to go into this thinking of a compromise with the adolescent. We want to think of this as only a one-way street kind of gift. It's totally fine if you want to barter with your child for these chores, for other things, but when you're thinking like emotional love, filling them up. Think about gifts only from you right now. When you get the gift, it's a great idea to make it with a ceremonious feel. Ceremony kind of feels awkward when you think about it with giving gifts, but we just want this to be a special moment. So wrapping the present might be an extra step you don't normally do, or sitting them down and handing it to them instead of being like, go open the trunk, there's something for you, right? We want to make it a special moment and something that they can understand, like, okay, my parent is really putting time and effort into this, so I want to pay attention. When you get the gift, it can be a great idea to pair this with another love language. So you might want to give them a hug when you get them the gift and explain how proud of them you are. Or maybe you want to just say, hey, I love you, and I wanted to give you this to show you that. All of those are great ways to really complement the gift giving love language. A lot of times, as I mentioned, people will have a primary or secondary love language. So gifts might be primary, but words of affirmation might be secondary. So it'd be awesome to say something when you're giving the gift. Types of gifts there are no rules really. We don't want to make it super extravagant if we don't need to. I'm sure people don't want to drop too much money on this, but you can get creative with it. So they can be expensive. They can be related to interest if it's appropriate. If your child really likes music, maybe you want to give them a $5 Apple Music gift card, or Spotify. Really think about like what they're really interested in right now and see if you can figure out a gift related to that they would really like. It's probably not the time to focus on your own interests as far as gift giving. We don't want to give them a guitar and say, I'm ready for you to learn how to play guitar, if that's not something they're interested in. This can be a cool time to use coupons that are still within your boundaries, but maybe you don't have really firm boundaries on something. For example, I like to say sleepovers. I hear a lot of times parents don't want their kids to have sleepovers 2 nights in a row because it makes their child really exhausted. Maybe we can let them have a free pass coupon as a gift and explain to them that this is a no strings attached. You can use this to have a Friday and Saturday night sleepover and we won't bug you about it. It can be all kinds of stuff as far as coupons go. So think about really what's going to work for your family or your student. I think coupons could definitely be used in the classroom as well to show a love language and show that you care about them and appreciate them. This could also be a good time to teach your adolescent ways to give. So maybe partner up with the kid and ask them, is there someone or something you really care about that you want to donate to, or should we give a gift to this person that we saw that we really think needs help? There are tons of websites out there. One that I really like to recommend is called dosomething.org. You can look on there and figure out if there's any kinds of donations needed anywhere, or other kinds of gifts that are handmade. There's also a really great website called The Letter Project. This is more geared towards girls, but you can have a female adolescent sign up to be a writer for the Letter Project, and they can write letters to girls who need emotional encouragement. So it's a really cool way to volunteer and give without spending money. Signs that this is your adolescent's love language would be maybe you're noticing that they give gifts to others. I mentioned earlier, young children like to give gifts of like art, for example. That would be a good sign. They really enjoy gifts as a way to express love. It could have changed, maybe not, but that's something that could be really effective in showing how much you care about your adolescent. So here is the link to the love language quiz. It's a really awesome tool to use, and just try it out. You don't have to write down the exact link right now. It's easy. You can just Google love languages and Gary Chapman's website will pop up like one of the first two links on there. I highly recommend going and checking out his website and his other books and other resources he has on his website. He writes books on other topics as well, like anger. He has a book on anger out. So it's always good to get different perspectives on these kinds of things and see what works for your family or your student. But that's a great resource to check out. So I want to go over some additional communication tips. These are not necessarily from Gary Chapman, but he does talk about some of these things, and they are great to have in your back pocket. They're great to work on for every kind of relationship, not just your relationship with an adolescent. It could be a spouse, a coworker, a boss. So all of these things are really great to keep in mind. I feel statements, better known as I messages, are a way to explain how you're feeling about something that you might want to confront someone on. So I wrote on here a bunch of blanks so that you can kind of look at the outline, but you can make this however you want. The key is starting off with I feel and providing a reasoning. So if you feel overwhelmed, you might say, I feel overwhelmed when I'm interrupted in a business meeting or a business call. I am trying to stay focused in that moment. Do you mind, can we talk about how to develop a plan for getting my attention in the future that doesn't involve interrupting me? Because I am feeling really overwhelmed. This is a great way to start a confrontational conversation without putting someone on high defense mode. If we start off a statement with, hey, you keep doing this, right, we're instantly, our anxiety and adrenaline is going to spike through the roof, right? That is going to put someone in argument mode or fight or flight mode. So try to approach these things with the statement, I feel. And that will explain your side of the story and get a clear message across without feeling like you're attacking them and without them feeling like they need to be defensive. Being calm in this moment and being approachable is very important. If you're thinking about this with an adolescent, probably sitting down, getting on their level, so we're not having some kind of authority fight with you being higher up, and just really feeling more approachable. When you are using an I feel statement, I do believe it's important to use reasoning. So we don't want to say, because I said so, because I'm the parent, because I'm the teacher. That can really frustrate these adolescents because they are able to think abstractly and they are able to hear your reasoning out. They want to learn. They're trying to figure things out for themselves and they want to figure out how they can confront other people. So think about yourself as a model and a teacher and a guide in this sense, and model to them how they can have these big, serious discussions without getting angry. Or if they feel angry, at least effectively manage it. If you need to take a breath, if you need to step away, just say that. Like, hey, I think I need to step away for a second. I'm feeling a little flustered. But staying more calm when we're having these serious discussions will be more effective. Open-ended questions are also really important here. So when you're trying to have better communication with an adolescent, I hear a lot, they'll say yes, no, it's fine, right? We'll say really short, closed things to end the conversation. While I do think we should respect that to an extent, if you want to start off maybe on a more hopeful note, we can try open-ended questions. So using like how and what to start a conversation is usually going to work out better and asking an open-ended question. So I wrote as an example, how do you think your classes went this week? That would probably get you a similar answer to asking if they signed into Zoom on time. If you ask if they signed into Zoom on time, it's going to sound like maybe you're expecting that they didn't. And we want to have positive intent and expect that positive things are going to happen. And they will hopefully meet those expectations. Other ways to say things open-endedly would be like, tell me more about that. What was that like for you? Or how does that make you feel? How did that impact you? Was that test challenging for you? What was it like to take that online for the first time? Or How do you feel about graduation being online for some schools? Thinking about the different experiences they're going through right now it's such a unique time that it might be a great way to start these unique kinds of conversations. Last but not least, I want to remind you guys about communicating with empathy. So we want to be empathetic and really meet them where they are, wherever that is, and be warm but firm. You're allowed to have boundaries, you're allowed to have rules, but try to approach it in a more warm and calm tone when you address those boundary violations. Meeting them where they are also means like taking into consideration what they're feeling. You may have an adolescent come at you with maybe a more aggressive tone, or they're kind of fighting with you and it looks like anger, but it might actually be that they're really hurt. And it's hard to remember that in the moment. You might feel defensive yourself, but if you can sit down and start to ask them questions, you may understand more where that is coming from. Think about like what is really underneath that's going on. Again, active listening is important here. So reflecting back what you hear, asking questions, labeling the emotions. This is a great time to teach your adolescents that they can experience more than one emotion at one time. Maybe they don't know that. Maybe most people don't know that. It's kind of a weird thing to feel like two totally different states. But right now, especially with COVID-19, I think it's fair to say a lot of us are feeling that way. We're feeling really internally conflicted and we're feeling different things at all the time. So reminding your child that they can feel this way. It is normal to have multiple emotions. They're not crazy, and validating them. So validating does not mean that you have to agree with everything they say, but it does mean that you are emotionally there for them. So you're giving them support by validating their feelings, like, oh, that must have been really hard for you, or yeah, going online might be awkward. It might not feel normal. I totally understand how you could feel that way. And last but not least, when an adolescent comes to you with a problem, they may not want you to jump into problem solving mode quite yet. They might just want you as someone who's going to listen to them and be their support system and really give them that warm, empathetic, maybe quality time or words of affirmation or physical touch, any of those love languages, and really just be there for them. I would try to let them problem solve first on their own, see if they're going to come up with things and solutions on their own. And a lot of adolescents will. If they can get the chance to like get through those feelings first, then we can get more in our reasonable mind and think things through more clearly. You are more than welcome to help your adolescent. There is no rule saying do not help them. But I would just maybe see if they want to figure it out first on their own, or if they ask you, please help them. One suggestion, and you probably already do this, but I like to remind parents, it's great to use your own examples from your life. Think about your own journey through school. And I know, I believe none of us have really lived through these kinds of times of the pandemic, but maybe you've had a bad grade before. When I grew up, my dad always told me that he got a 34 in some college class, and I remember that all through undergrad when I made a bad grade because it made me feel better. And knowing my dad ended up having his master's degree, it made me feel like, okay, I can still get past this. So use those stories that you have, use those experiences when your adolescent is ready to listen, and then work together when you're ready to problem solve. Don't just give them all the answers. Brainstorming together. You can brainstorm the most silly solutions first if that gets them more comfortable, maybe saying absolutely ridiculous things. Totally depends on the adolescent. But try to get them to think about things on their own because they are ready for that developmentally. They are ready to start abstractly thinking through their problems and getting through it themselves. And you can be there as their emotional support and their guide. Here are some additional resources I love to recommend. So of course, The 5 Love Languages of Teenagers by Gary Chapman, and he has several other books. Freeing Your Child from Anxiety. This is a great book series. The author has several. Tamara Chansky. I don't want to butcher her name, but that's how I would pronounce it. And then The Whole Brain Child by Daniel Siegel and Tina Bryson. They have more than just one book as well, but this is a great way to think about holistically thinking about adolescents and children. I love to recommend Brene Brown any chance I get. She's awesome. So check out any of her books, but Rising Strong is a newer one and it's great. She also has a Netflix special out that I've heard really great reviews. I actually haven't gotten the chance to see it yet, but I love her podcast. So check her out in any forms you can. She also has a TED Talk I wrote up here. Another TED Talk I highly recommend is Your Body Language May Shape Who You Are by Amy Cuddy. This is a really popular TED Talk. I think it's like top 10 of all time or something like that. So I would check it out. It's eye-opening, and she gives a lot of great advice on how to improve your body language. Okay, so I want to talk for a second about our practice, and then I'll open the floor up to questions. So again, my name is Lauren Moore. I'm a therapist at Queen City Counseling and Consulting in South Park. My email is right here. It's lauren@qc-counseling.com. We have a website, and I have my Psychology Today link. We do accept clients, again, ages 13 to 25. And I wanted to flip through the next page real fast to show you guys some new offerings we have. On the left side, we've got our parent support group coming up. It is free on this particular Saturday. We would love for any of you guys to join us. It's really a great chance for parents and or caregivers to have some emotional support and really bounce ideas off each other. It's always been a really great group. We do have in-person seating, but very limited because we have to socially distance, of course. So virtually is another great option if you do not want to come in person. Second thing is our Mindful Moments parent support group. So this is starting on May 15th, it's coming up, and we have 2 time offerings. So we're offering 7:30 to 8:30 if any of you guys are morning birds and don't have anything to do at that time, maybe you do. And then we have 12 to 1, so hopefully catching you at the lunch hour. Again, this is another chance to get some support from each other as parents or caregivers, and also learn some mindfulness. So we're going to walk through some mindfulness activities and talk about mindfulness in general. Mindfulness is a really powerful tool, especially during times where you feel like you're not being able to get out of the house and experience a lot of other things. Mindfulness really slows us down and we can really experience what we have. Okay, so I want to open the floor up for questions. If anyone has any, feel free.
I have a question.
Okay.
Okay, my question, you said they could have a primary and a secondary.
Mm-hmm.
Do they alternate back and forth? Does one could become a primary to the second or vice versa?
Yeah, so we can definitely change, even in adulthood, things can change over time. So that's why I like to recommend using all 5 if you can. But yes, they can change from week to week even. It depends on what the adolescent is experiencing. Again, they're in a developmental period where they're trying to figure out who they are. So you might see them change in a lot of things, right? Their interests might change. All of a sudden you thought they loved soccer and they stopped playing, right? It's of course important to really ask questions and get at maybe why things are different. But it is okay to change your love language, and it is, I think, a little bit to be expected. I don't think that happens with everyone, but yes, they can absolutely change and maybe go back and forth from their primary and secondary, or maybe they feel like they really have 2 strong ones that are just both 2 primary love languages. if you ever take the quiz yourself, it may or may not stand out to you that it was hard to decide between a couple questions. And that could be the same for an adolescent or even a child.
Yeah, I am studying the book right now,
Oh, okay.
actually, believe it or not.
That's great.
And um, and my question was about him, my son.
Mm-hmm.
And since this COVID-19, I've seen quite a change in him.
Okay.
Um, some depression, some
Mm-hmm.
fear. Um, and so I'm picked up this book and tried to decide what love language is he
Yeah.
and what I needed to do to help reinforce it.
Have you been trying to experiment a little bit to figure it out?
Well, um, it seems to be uh, touch and um, quality time.
Okay.
And then a little affirmation is another one.
Okay.
I, I thought at first the affirmation would be his first,
Hmm.
but I keep going back and forth on that.
Okay. Yeah. It could depend on mood too, when you think about it, especially with touch. That's why I brought up mood is, I don't know if you guys have ever had that moment where you're just like, do not touch me, do not talk to me, right? They can have those times, and we shouldn't expect them to just always be on to receiving emotional love. But I think it's important to just let them know that you are always there for them. And then periodically, yes, giving that love language, maybe doing multiple. It sounds like there's 3 that your son is kind of leaning into. So I would
Yeah,
alternate them, and you can always combine them, right? Like words of affirmation is a really easy one to hop onto physical touch or gifts or anything else. So think about like how you can maybe get creative with that.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions or comments, concerns, criticism? I'll take it all. Does anyone is anyone in here ever taken a love language quiz? Has anyone ever tried to figure out your own? Yeah. I wonder if any of yours surprised you or if you've noticed a change.
We actually did take it as a staff at
Oh,
the
you
beginning
did?
of the year on our professional like development when we met before school, and it was really helpful for me to know what each of the teachers and
Yeah.
staff what their love language was, and until the COVID-19, it made me understand each of them in a different way. So and how to affirm or what they liked. So yeah,
Yeah.
I love it.
I think it's a great tool too to like check yourself. Like not everyone is thinking in your own love language. I think for me when I was growing up and stuff, I loved words of affirmation and I just automatically assumed that that's what everyone around me wanted, right? Like it's important to think about what other people want and how we can meet them where they are. So I think giving the team a quiz like that, that's awesome. That's so helpful. And it's great that you guys did that.
Hey, I have a question. So you pointed to a website where they've got a quiz. Would
Yes.
you recommend maybe letting your 16-year-old take that quiz as
Oh,
kind of a
yeah.
self-discovery thing?
Yeah. I don't know. I need to go through the questions that they have on the website. But I know for a fact, I used to work at a partial hospitalization program, and we would give out love language quizzes that were designed for adolescents. So if I would probably just go through the questions real fast on your own, make sure that they're appropriate for your child. I
Okay.
assume that they are, but yes, there are definitely resources out there that are free, and you can get an adolescent quiz. That would be great. I think they'd be interested in that. I'd hope. They'd probably be like, what is this? But that would be a great way to figure it out as well. Absolutely.
Okay. And then I do have one other little follow-on question. Um, I have a 16-year-old daughter, and the quality time thing, well, she goes through wanting to just be completely alone in a room to really wanting quality time. It kind of flips back and forth. But she's hyper focused on certain things that are just kind of not in my wheelhouse of interests. And I want to be involved and interested, but sometimes it's kind of hard because her interest is so different from mine. Do
Yeah.
you got any advice on that?
Yeah. Well, I would tell you what the book would tell you to do, and that's to lean into it and just, say whatever to your own interest. But I
Mhm.
would say, I think it'd be a great conversation to ask your daughter, like, hey, I'm trying to get into this, but I'm having trouble. Like, is there anything related to this that we could look at together? I really want to be there for you and spend quality time for you. How do you think I could go about this? Um,
Okay.
they have the ability to think through those things, and I would imagine that they want to take on the challenge of like, how can we interest our parents in this thing that we love?
Okay.
Yeah, I would include her in that conversation.
Okay.
Mhm.
Cool. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah.
Okay. Studying this book, I had decided that my son needed quality time. So we went up to Kings Mountain yesterday,
Wow.
and he likes rock music, okay? Death metal rock music. And let me tell you, that is not my cup of tea. Not. But anyway, I let him play it. And reading the book, I open-ended questions and asked him what he liked about it, what it made him feel. And let me tell you, I learned a whole lot.
Wow.
And in some of those death metal music things, whether since I can't understand what they're saying, they have some meaning to them.
Yeah.
And I got my eyes opened. Um, and it was one of the best trips I have ever had. We spent 2.5 hours together in the car. Um, Needless to say, when I got home, I had to take a nice quiet walk. Um, but I leaned into it, and it was the best experience I think I've had in a long time. And so it may not be your cup of tea, but if you open up and let them spend time, you spend time with it, they will open up more than you'll ever know.
Cool. Thank you.
That's a great suggestion. It's sometimes it feels so simple to say ask them questions, but we really forget to slow down and break things down and really just start a conversation. But I think that's awesome that you asked those kinds of things, and it obviously led to some great times. So I'm glad that you shared that experience. Thank you for sharing. Are
I
there any other?
found the same thing with my son too. With when we were driving back and forth to school, it was music was the perfect way to get him. If I could let him play any music, and I honestly I hate all the music that he listens to. Like same thing, like, and I can't do it every day because it's like torture.
Mhm.
But he will talk my ear off if I'll let him listen and pick the music out.
Mhm.
So I found music to be a good thing. One thing I was going to ask you for quality time. My son does not seem to want to spend any time unless it's like midnight. At
Mm.
this point, like, is there any suggest? And then when you don't want to do it at that time, it's more like rejecting. So I have not found an avenue other than in the car and listening to music. Do you
Okay.
have any suggestions for that? Like,
Yeah, I would, well, you could try to push yourself a little bit and stay up a little bit later, but I know that's next to impossible, especially on a work night. But secondly, I think using those I feel statements could be pretty powerful here. So saying like, hey, I feel kind of conflicted because I really want to spend time with you, and I know that your normal time is midnight and you're like ready to go, but my body's natural time clock has me asleep at that time. Is there any way we could push it a little bit earlier? Maybe a compromise, and see what he says. Give him a chance to like think about it and really ponder, maybe plan something himself that would work for both of you guys. And this is a common theme with adolescents. Their biological clocks are just different than ours, right? They're up more at night and they sleep in more because that's actually how their bodies are wired. And you could even explain that to him, like, hey, our body's working differently here. Is there any way we could do this at like 9, right? But maybe figuring out that compromise would be a good way to start.
Like that.
I think it just broke up. Did someone speak? Okay. Any other questions or comments?
You went in and out there for a second. I think a lot of the times why he does it at night too is he's told me it's like when he finally is alone and his brain slows down, so then he has all these things that he wants to talk about. So that's part of it too. But one thing that with the music, I don't know for any of the parents that are on here, we just did last week with Queen City, and Lauren's colleague Perrin did a music therapy session that, I mean, my son loved it. It was awesome. So we're going to do that again when we're back next year in person. I think that'll be great. The kids really seem to like that a lot.
Yeah, Perrin does an amazing job. She is a music therapist, and she's also about to graduate, I think, in like 2 Mondays. She's going to be a certified, working on her certified counseling licensure as well. So she's double dipping, and she's awesome. You can actually sign up with her for music therapy at our practice on a basis, however you want to do it. If you are ever interested in it, you could do it like once a month or once a week. But Perrin would say it better, but there's just so many different opportunities when it comes to music therapy, and it's really utilizing it in a therapeutic way that may speak to your child that other things have not. So I would highly recommend looking into that if you're interested. Perrin's email is perrin@qc-counseling.com. And you can always check out our website or call us as well. Thank you for bringing that up.
Well, if there's no other questions, I just want to thank you for your time tonight. That was awesome. Thank you to Queen City Counseling and Ashley and Amy and Perrin and you for all that you do for our families and students and partnering with us to help us. So thank you so much, and we look forward to having you back out to the school when we're back up and running. So.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I was really happy to do this. And please, if you guys have any other questions about anything, you can always email me, and I'm happy to make myself available for you guys, especially during this time. Please feel free to reach out. But thank you all for coming and asking some awesome questions as well.